In today's video, I'm going to talk about the two states that have really affected my manifestation ability and expanded it, and the time that I really messed it up and why that happened, and then finally how I took my power back and returned to what I consider is a completely natural thing that we all do, which is manifest or create or realize, whatever word you want to use. And they do have different connotations, but let's not worry about that and just look at basically having what it is that we desire, what we intend, what is aligned with us, what is serving our true joy, our purpose, our visions, okay? So, what are the two states that have helped me manifest the most? It's basically the state of ease and the state of joy. And I've been able to use these for some of my most potent creations, things that I had no idea how I would possibly get them. I didn't necessarily have a plan. And even if I had a plan, it wasn't the plan that created them. It was that they came into being in unexpected ways, which is often what manifestation does. So now you might be saying, hey, look, how am I supposed to be in a state of joy or ease when I'm stressed, when I'm perhaps panicked about something? There's something that I really, really desire or really, really need at this stage. And I understand that. I've been in those experiences, of course, as a human. And what I have learned is that we have the power to change our state. It is not outside circumstances. It is not what is going on. It is not the conditions that we often think are limiting us. It's actually within our power. And I could probably, go on about that in a longer way, but for this video, I'm just going to do more of a summary so you understand. And those of you who already understand this topic fairly well will probably absorb it fairly quickly as a result. Others may want to go look back at some of my other videos that talk about some of the nuances and the things that can stop us. But so let's say ease or joy. We can literally manufacture these in the moment. How do we do that? We do that all the time, and we certainly did it as children. And that is, we think, we imagine, we create an idea in our mind's eye and then feel it into being, right? So, what if I was hanging out on the beach in Hawaii right now? How would that feel? And you just enjoy it. And there's no conditions in that moment. There's nothing about how am I going to make it happen. There's not questions about when is this going to actually be possible. Maybe my schedule is so packed right now. Maybe others aren't on board and they want to go elsewhere. Whatever we think is in our way. For this moment, we're not wondering about that. We're not worrying about that. All we're doing is going to Hawaii in our imagination, and we just enjoy it. And I am not joking when I say I have literally done that with trips and with other experiences, and then in a very short span of time, sometimes days, sometimes a week, sometimes a bit longer, those things have come into my experience, into my life. And I was not going step by step into making that happen. What I was doing was shifting where my attention goes and changing my feeling state. So I moved into joy. I moved into joy without actually having anything in my hand, so to speak, without physically being anywhere, without having a ticket in my hand to fly there. Instead, I entered that image, that experience in my mind's eye. And to some extent, you can say in my body, because I was feeling it. What would that feel like, right? And it's not about feeling it like exactly like, oh, what would that sand feel like? Or, what would I be wearing? Like, some people go into all those details. If it makes it fun for you, awesome. I find what I do is connect to the simplest thing that could mean. For me, honestly, I think the sunshine, right? Just the feeling of sunshine and maybe a light breeze moving through and the sound of the ocean, right? And where I am, I have an ocean, but it's not as the climate certainly isn't as hot all year round, and so I know there is a difference between where I am currently and what Hawaii would be like, and so I bring that into my experience. Now, if I didn't know, like say, let's say I was going to say, imagine being in Bali, and I haven't been there. So I might go online and look at some examples, or I may just have, sometimes we just have an intuitive connection to a place, like what we think it might feel like, and that would be great, right? It's not about exactness in this case. At least that's my experience. And part of it is because I do want to stay in a state of ease. When I start thinking about details, I start thinking, and then when I start thinking, all of a sudden it gets a little complicated. So again, the state of ease and the state of joy. And joy, again, I've had multiple times where I've literally like just allowed myself to imagine something that would just feel super fun for me in that moment. And again, it's kind of like daydreaming, right? It's like, okay, maybe the day is going really tough. Oh, imagine if I only had this, or I was experiencing something. And then I just enter that and I just let it like fill me up. At times I've even like started laughing because it was just, I really, really invited it in. And again, I was able to manifest. Now, these, by the way, aren't things that I'm doing on a daily basis, constantly trying to make things happen, because that kind of goes against what I'm saying, because that wouldn't be ease. That would be constantly trying to force myself into experiences, force myself into some like rhythmic, planned imagining, and that is not ease for me. If it is for you, awesome, right? So that's, again, the important thing is, what is ease for you? What is joy for you? It doesn't have to look like mine or anyone else's, right? So that is how I have manifested. And honestly, let's see, I mean, I've used this for many, many years, right? A couple of decades, but let's just say in the last 5 years, I have had some of the biggest differences occur. And I will get to that a bit later in this video when I talk about taking my power back, because now what I'm going to do is move into when I gave my power away, when I lost track of my capacity, when I began focusing too much on what others were saying, and also thinking that I had to learn to manifest, that I had to follow steps, right? So possibly, like some of you, I went through a stage where I was taking courses, and it wasn't necessarily specifically in manifestation, but it was an element of it, and it was some with my coaching work and all that. And these were, larger group programs, not the one-on-one. And so they often taught things like Think and Grow Rich, Napoleon Hill's book, they talked about The Secret and all of that. And I'd read those books, and I certainly value them and appreciate them. But what I found was happening in the programs is that there was a lot of pressure and stress that was coming up. And it wasn't obviously a direct intention, maybe. I don't know. I can't actually speak for the people who created these offers. But let's just say there's a lot of participants on the calls and et cetera in the programs who were stressed, who were really stressed. And so it just kept amplifying the stress of people not having, and them being in stress about not having, and then some of the programs often focused on the gap between where we are and where we wanted to be. And this is often discussed in things in business, for example, where it's like, yeah, so, you got to be really clear on your numbers, where you are now and where you want to be, so you can start taking the actions towards the bigger numbers. You can start filling it in. And that may sound logical. And honestly, if you're in a state of calm, of ease and joy, as I said, and you did that exercise, it may really work for you. But what I found at that time was these exercises were creating a state of lack. They were showing me in black and white on paper or on my computer that I didn't have what it is that I desired, that I didn't have what it took to have my vision yet, that I had to do things, that I had to take all these actions to make that vision real. And what does that make one feel? It makes you feel horrible. It makes you feel like you're in lack, that you're not good enough yet in some way. Even if my mind's not thinking that, there is that kind of message that there's something that you have to change about who you are. You have to change yourself. And yes, there is a change, but it's not like your fundamental essence we're changing. It's the way we're thinking, the way we're imagining, the way we are having or we are lacking. And so, during these years, I kid you not, they were the hardest because I basically manifested. Remember, manifestation does not judge between positive and negative, having and lack. It just gives you what it is that you're observing and noticing and placing your attention on. So what was I placing my attention on? Obviously unconsciously, well, maybe a bit intentionally, because I thought that's what these programs were asking me to do in a sense. And that's the voices that I was hearing around me of other participants. And some of it confused me. I was like, why are we focusing this way? But, at that time I was in learning mode. I was like, okay, I'm going to, these people obviously have created a lot of success. Let's learn from them and keep an open mind. So I ended up focusing on the state of lack. I began amplifying it by noticing it, by observing it, by trying to measure on a regular basis. Am I any closer? Did this action produce any result? What am I doing right? What am I doing wrong? And that just kept manifesting lack. It manifested stress. It manifested waiting. It manifested an experience of, I'm not good enough yet. I've got to do things. I've got to change. I don't even know what I'm supposed to change. It's something I'm supposed to change, right? And it was just not a fun time at all, as you can imagine. And maybe some of you are there right now. And so listening to that, I had to finally pull myself out of it because it was not doing me any good. It was creating experiences that I did not desire. But it was showing me something which I didn't realize at the time. It showed me how effectively I manifest, because I was manifesting lack because I kept noticing it. So there's the clue. What happens if I put my attention on something else? What happens if I notice something else? And so I stopped taking those programs, thank God. And then I moved on to other teachings, both in book and other videos, and other teachers that I found were more in alignment with me because they reminded me of the state, the power of taking back our state and choosing our state. And honestly, even 20 years ago, before I ever studied any of this, I was doing that. That's why I keep saying it's a natural thing that we do often as children, because we have that capacity. And then we get trained out of it, right? Or conditioned out of it, or we just give it up thinking that, it's not true anymore or something, when in fact it actually is highly available to us at any point. So I took my power back and I said, okay, look, let's observe what has happened. Isn't it interesting how when I was here trying to make a big change in my life, trying to, take these programs and do the so-called right thing, that I then did the opposite. Because I had times in my life before where I didn't have difficulties financially or in making decisions or when I first started my business, I did land a big client very quickly, and I did this all on my own at that time. So what was I doing differently? Well, first of all, I was giving my power away by thinking that these other people must know more than me, instead of walking into these programs saying, I do know what I know and I'm willing to learn and open to that. And at times when, say, it got too much because like other people were not a fit into the state that I wanted to be in, I could have made the choice not to join these and attend programs and experiences where there was a deeper understanding already. They weren't like total newbies. And I'm talking for myself. I'm not like putting anyone down in this case, because that in itself was a learning experience for me, right? So it's not here to say, oh, it's their fault, because perhaps I had to go down that road and see like what actually happens, because manifestation does not judge. It just gives us what we're focusing on. And I accept it, certainly as somebody who does guide others, who coaches others, right, who teaches others, that sometimes we go through more because we are willing to learn and make mistakes and learn through failure, right? So it did teach me something, and it also showed me that I had the courage to make a mistake, whereas earlier in my life I was doing my best not to make mistakes. And we don't learn as much when we put that kind of condition on ourselves. So I just woke up and I decided I was going to take back my power and I was going to deal with it, right? So there's an assertion there. There's an assertion there that now I can and I will. I find a way. I don't know how, and I don't need to know how, but just that I'm going to be doing it. I've changed my mind. That's what I did. I changed my mind about the results I was going to have. And it didn't matter at that time if I had to go at a snail's pace, moment by moment, day by day, dollar by dollar, to reshape the energy in a way, to bring my attention to growth now instead of decrease, right? But that's what I was going to do. And you can, of course, I'm talking about money and business in this case, but you can relate it to any topic that's important to you about moving into a state of abundance, right? So, first of all, I got clear on what I needed or desired at that moment. And there did feel like a need, as in I needed or I desired this state of greater stability. So not this up, down, dramatic experience, which, does happen in entrepreneurship. So it's not like I'm trying to erase it. But in terms of my financial stability, I wanted less of that up, down, of being in any state of pressure. Instead, it was like, no, let's return to a state of ease, right? I did that before, and I'm going to do it again. And even if I hadn't done it before, because sometimes there's things we are manifesting we haven't had experience with, we've never felt, we don't know what it would be like. And again, we have to use our imagination, just grabbing like one little thing, like what would certain, and for me, it would just like be relief. It would be relief if I knew on a monthly basis, on an annual basis, that I was supported, that things were provided for. And so I began to be specific in that moment on, okay, what would that be? What would just allow me to feel safe again? And some of it, yes, I put a number to it, because now I was willing to put a number to it. I wasn't trying to jump into, oh, I want millions of dollars. I was just like, let's look at stability, because that would, to have a more stable sense of nervous system and ease through my day would be powerful. Then I could think more clearly, and then I could take, calculated risks. And so I felt into that, and I got a number, and then I accepted it. Okay, that's what I'm having. And right away, that I moved in from a state of lack to a state of I am having it. And who knows about the how? I removed also the conditions of how I thought that these funds, this income would come to me. Before, I was completely squeezing it into a certain service I was offering because I really wanted that to take off. And I was closing the door on other ways it could arrive. So at that moment, I guess I finally decided and learned to let go of those conditions, let go of those limitations, and just say, you know what? This is a stability I desire. And then, we can return to this particular service later, grow it, but let's return to the experience of having stability. And then once I got that, because guess what? Now I'm focusing and giving my attention to it, I begin creating it. Like it starts showing up, sometimes in really little ways, and other times much more significant ways. But usually when I moved into significant ways, I'd already kind of practiced this and grown, strengthened this muscle, so to speak. And I'd already been in a state of stability. So then I was like, okay, now I'm open to more. I'm open to more flow and overflow. And then it began to shift into that. And sometimes it came, often, not sometimes, often it came in completely different ways. And it was that staying there, it was making the decision, it was being clear, it was letting go of resisting the ways that I didn't want it to come in, because I had judgments about that. And sometimes it's just judgment, like, there's pride. Our pride gets in the way. Like, oh, I want this has to work. And if it comes this way, and even if that way is really easy, I'm rejecting it because I want to be the hero, that kind of attitude that we sometimes hold. And so I had to let that go and say, well, why would I possibly reject other opportunities, other gifts, other ways it can come? Why would I do that to myself? If I'm truly abundant, wouldn't I just receive it all? And so moving into that state began to really shift things to a place where it's very different now. That doesn't mean I've accomplished everything. It just means that I have sustained that state, and then I moved into a state of overflow. And still, sometimes I go back into that feeling of limitation, and I have to remind myself to practice shifting that gently so that I'm not pushing, forcing, pressuring, hustling, chasing anything. I'm actually just letting go, releasing of the resistance, releasing the, oh my gosh, this is going to be hard, and reminding myself it's already here. It's already here. Let's settle into that. And so notice also that it wasn't just, the first time I got what I desired and then I gave up. I kept nurturing it, right? It's like exercise. You don't do it for 2 months and then give up for the next 5, right, until you need it again, right? Anybody who actually wants to be healthy and will do that they will just make a commitment to it. So I began to treat my sense of prosperity, my abundance, like that, and still do, and enjoy it, and then realize, now I can grow it. Now I can do different things. Now I can invest it, by the way, not just spend it, not just I want more so I can spend more, but what am I investing in? Right? What parts am I growing and keeping for saving, and what parts am I using because, using it also creates a flow, right? So I'm not hoarding either, right? So really developing a healthy relationship with this topic, with this energy. So manifesting is so much easier when we're in that state of ease and joy, both states that we can manufacture, we can create in a moment, simply through imagination, and then relaxing the rest of the day, or, relaxing as in letting go of, not like you have to sit there and focus all day, Okay, so letting that go and then getting on with the day, doing whatever things that come to you to do, and continuing, of course, to grow and take new actions and take new risks and all of that, but staying in that state of having. So um, I hope that's been helpful. If you actually would like support in being supported and guided through time to really enter these states and learn how to, create the state of your desire, and then to also not only sustain it but allow it to begin to flourish, you can connect with me on the link below, and we can start with either a few sessions, or you can enter a longer package if you have a bigger vision, because I do work with people who have bigger visions, who have businesses, who are creating something perhaps quite different than they've ever done before, or growing into a new level that they've never had before. And I use both these manifestation principles, but also very common sense and sometimes out of the box ways of thinking about growth and change and how to actually be living our bigger vision.